Hurry on, tat sat, y'all. Welcome back to Chit Chat, where our motto is get yo shit together. The word chit means enlightened awareness, and the exploration of the impositions on that awareness and what we might do to remove them is what we like to talk about here in Chit Chat. Today we have a wonderful guest and friend with us, Vrindavani. Please welcome her, everyone. Kishore is gonna I should also introduce Kishore. My call is Kishore. Kishore, you can introduce her.
Yes, so I'm very happy to have you here, Vrindavan, as a guest. And actually, you're our first guest. We've always kind of just been like, we need a guest, we should get a guest. And I really love that this happened naturally because in last week's Chit Chat, there was a post that you had posted recently on your social media. And like I was telling you earlier, last week's Chit Chat, me and Jaya just talked about that post and you the entire time because it was so inspiring. For those of you who don't know Vrindavan, she is a coach and she's a meditation teacher that teaches at various places, including the Bhakti Center. And she also does a lot of work with the Enneagram. And on Instagram, she's illuminate.nyc, and she posts like these really thoughtful, wonderful, insightful things that I feel are kind of like they're very unique and they're very personal and they're very vulnerable in a way that's not like I was talking about this with a student of mine today. I was like, I feel like in the social media world, there's like a way of being vulnerable where it's like oversharing and it's almost like, kind of virtue signaling, like, look at me. And then there's a way of being vulnerable that's just like real and genuine and authentic and actually like saying what we're going through. And that was what this post that you had posted recently, maybe like last week or a week and a half ago, was about how kind of like the constraints of social media, kind of like today we've called this episode Pigeonholed into Pride. And it's like they kind of like constrain us or push us into this like box of how we have to be or how we have to present, the personas we have to create in social media. And this allows us to kind of just like be in the process of our learning, being in the process of our growth. And I something I really like that you wrote about is that in this social media world, or just in the world in general, there's a lot of pressure to kind of be like, I'm an expert, I'm like an advanced guide, I'm like this, there's so much pressure to kind of market and brand ourselves to fit these like character limits that you were speaking about, whether in Instagram or Twitter or etc. Facebook. Because I mean, it makes sense, like I was really thinking about this. I was like, it makes sense, like we have this amount of space to like just like tell everyone who we
yourself.
are,
Right.
sell yourself. And so it seems like it's such a, like, again, like we're being pigeonholed into a place where we have to just like show off in kind of a way. And so I really appreciated how you were writing about like the process and how there's not a lot of space to just like be in the process, be in the growth, and accept that that's where I am.
Okay, given that you have more than a few characters to describe who you are, let's start with that. Who are you? And you can take as many characters as you require.
Yes.
Well, I can tell you what I wish would come naturally and then I'll start with that, and then I'll go with what, I normally say. I wish I could say I'm spirit soul having a material experience, because that is ultimately who we are, each and every one of us. But that is still in theoretical land for me, with little glimpses of realization and not quite at the realization stage yet. But typically I say I'm kind of what you said, Kishore, that I'm an Enneagram coach, I'm a meditation teacher. I'm also, I would add, no, I'm a student. I'm a student of the Gita. I'm a student of trying to learn what humility really means. That's what I am. And along with that, now I can say mother and so many other different roles and responsibilities that have come into my life. But I'll go back to that piece of I wish first and foremost that would come to my consciousness, and that I would feel very free to say is I'm actually a soul.
Okay, so you're a student of the Gita. I'll just write you off right now. You have nothing good to offer.
That's right. I got nothing to offer. You know, I'm learning this parenting thing, so I'm not a parenting expert either. You know, I'm a student of meditation. I'm a student of the Enneagram. Yeah, I just student. So I guess nothing to offer. Got nothing to offer.
Well, at least you're honest with us. Now we'll go elsewhere.
Yes,
So-
please do. By the way, thanks so much for having me on for like these last couple of minutes. You can find an expert now. Go for it.
So yeah, let's get into this a little bit more because as I'm going to use a very generic term, spiritualists, or as practicing bhakti yogis, trying to add value not only to our communities but to the world around us. And in our attempts to add value, we feel that we have to engage with the world around us, such as the social media world, etc. And we've been talking about this a lot in the last few episodes of Chit Chat. But in engaging with these things which are toxic, just to keep it plain, there's every chance of being corrupted by it. And I often wonder how many of people, like in our own devotional communities or other religious communities in general, when they're engaging with these things, how do they protect themselves from internal corruption, which is very easy to fall into. And so from the post that Kishore is referencing, maybe we should read it again at one point during this thing. But in your post, from that particular post, I get a sense that you're alluding to that. At least you're like thinking about that. And that might be a genuine concern that you have. So how do you deal with that, like personally? I mean, I don't know that I do deal with it. I think for myself, I'm just like, I'm gonna just be contaminated, whatever, and dive in. And
I don't think that's true at all. Anyways.
But well, I've just been thinking about it a lot more. In fact, during this week, I'm part of a men's group, and in the men's group, we have committed to do 24-hour period, a complete digital media fast, with the idea of gaining more control of our life. So it's just something that's in my psyche a lot more. So let's start there. How do you deal with the need to add value to the world around you, and then you're engaging with things that are kind of almost inherently corrupting or corrupting by nature? Like, how do you navigate that?
Such a great question. I'll add in another layer of complexity, if I may. I'm also a solo entrepreneur. So that means that this is my way of trying to connect with others who might not otherwise ever find me or meet me, and I may not have an opportunity to serve. And add now COVID on top of all of these things. So there's no real face-to-face connection. That makes it even more difficult. Right? Adding all of those caveats in, I'll say that it's a day-to-day battle. It's a day-to-day internal battle. So every single time I'm either thinking of posting something, or I'm writing something, or I'm about to hit, publish or send or whatever it may be, there's so much internal chatter going on. There's just so much. There's the chatter of, is this what people want? Is this what people like? Is this what is going to somehow blow up? And this is what people will really like, I'll become known for, right? Versus also the other side of that saying, this is a tool, right? So if it's a tool, that means I use it and I be detached from the result.
Yeah,
that's a really important piece to this. And then there's also the internal knowledge that all of this is temporary. I mean, I've been speaking to a friend of mine who understands, especially Instagram much better than I do. And she was saying these posts, most of them have, if even, a life cycle of 24 hours. God, and I'm spending so much time trying to curate and make sure that whatever I'm writing is, yeah, exactly. Right. It just feels like so much pressure in hopes that somehow I'll receive some validation and some acknowledgement that, hey, I exist, which I think in many ways is what all of these social platforms are all about. It's a validation tool to feel like I exist.
Wow.
Mm.
You got something on that, Kishore? I got a lot. I'm like right now.
I have a lot. Well, I mean, the first thing I want to say is that just like resonates with me a lot. You know, I was speaking a lot about this last time. You know, especially when you said like I'm a solo entrepreneur, and this is how I do it. You know, and so that resonates with me a lot as well because I'm also a solo entrepreneur, and I'm also kind of just doing that. However, when you mentioned this about validation, this is something that's really, really been on my mind of like that internal chatter that you brought up. That how what's the boundary or what's the limit, you know, between like me, my genuine experience, my authenticity, and then the internal chatter that comes, which is, are they going to like it? What do I need to edit? How do I make this more, I don't know, marketable so that it blows up or whatever? And I mean, like, the thing is that inevitably, sometimes, you know, I'm speaking for myself, but sometimes you listen to the internal chatter, you know,
Only
inevitably it's like,
sometimes. Oh, you're advanced.
lots of
You are
lots of times, and you make those edits, you like play into it, you know, you do the things that you think you're supposed to do. And I'm just really resonating and amplifying with Vrin. It's like it feels very exhausting, and like to know that this post has a 24-hour life cycle. Recently I kind of like took a break from social media for like a month, and then I'm still kind of like trying to refigure out my relationship with it because I just got very exhausted. I got very like what's the word, jaded, and kind of feeling disingenuous. And so I mean, this is an ongoing question for me, and so that's why I'm just like amplifying, and it really resonates what you said of just like it's a day-to-day battle. And it's like, how are we, yeah, I guess like how are we supporting each other in that day-to-day battle, I suppose, because a lot of the times, especially in COVID world, it feels very like we're on our phones and like that's where we exist, you know, like I exist here on the phone, and the only way for me to like show people that I'm still here and that I exist is to like post a story or post something. I mean, I thought it was so funny. I'll end with this. When I went with my month-long break or whatever, a lot of my students were like, my yoga students were like, "Are you okay? Like, where have you been? And we miss knowing about you. We miss knowing about your life and what's going on with you and this." And you know, it's, of course it's very sweet, but to a certain extent, I feel like it's also kind of scary that like our life, our physical life, like our this life that we live in this material world has kind of been like transposed into a digital platform where if you're not no longer participating in digital social media or whatever, you're almost kind of like forgotten, you know, in a sense. And then there's that fear of like, oh, I'm not validated, like I'm not remembered, I'm not here. And it's such a you know, for lack of a better word, it's such a like mind game in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. When you were speaking, what came to mind, and this is really what I guess in some ways drove that post for me. This that just kind of kept coming up, that these character limits that social media imposes on us actually reveal our character. Because I've been meditating on that a lot. How is my character being revealed? By how I'm writing something, how I'm showing up. And that's not just on the external level. Like what's going on internally is also revealing my character to myself. And that's frightening, actually. It brings a lot of, it's very confronting to know that if I espouse, and as Bhakti practitioners, we have so many values and qualities that we espouse to imbibe and to live up to. And that, and I really like how you put it before, that so many spiritualists are on this platform, and how often as aspiring spiritualists are we questioning whether what we're doing on this platform is actually in line with our spiritual values.
That question scares me, frankly speaking. I'm thinking about Sharanagati. You know, that's supposed to be the moral compass of a bhakta. The six limbs of Sharanagati means surrender. It's a very important principle in Bhakti Yoga tradition. The beginning of devotion is understood as faith characterized by surrender, or the refuge-taking tendency in the soul toward God. So the first two principles: do what is favorable. for your practice, and reject what is unfavorable. Now, using that as a moral compass, if I were to put that question to my engagement with the digital universe, I mean, the answer is self-evident for me, like right now. But I kind of just like, I'm like callous to that at this point, or just apathetic. And does that mean, and I don't want it to translate in my head as like, that means I must be apathetic towards my bhakti then, or towards my devotion. But it does make you question, is this really central for me? Like, is my devotional life really central for me? Because if it was central for me, why am I apathetic to this question? Why am I apathetic to the obvious answer to this question? And why am I not correcting it? And then you start to just feel fake, and after that, you go on Netflix. No, I'm kidding. I don't do that. I don't watch Netflix.
Happens to me.
I canceled my Netflix a year and a half ago, and I only had it for a few months. But yeah, you just kind of like numb yourself to the reality of your apathy toward the thing that is supposed to be most important for you. And I guess, do you encounter that, and how do you deal with that emotional state when it comes up? Yeah, how does that? Yeah, that's my question though.
Yeah, it's such a good question. There's a lot of compartmentalization that goes on, right? I think as spiritualists, this is something that kind of maybe we're not so aware of. That we're really good at compartmentalizing. It's like, oh yes, this is how I live my life here, and then on this side, this way. And I think that this is a subtle type of compartmentalization. That's why it's difficult, and it's not talked about as much, right? It's easy to say that, well, with this set of friends, when I meet up with them, I do this or engage in these activities, and when I'm with my spiritual friends, I engage in these activities. That's a much more tangible and more gross example. And I think most of us can wrap our minds around that. It's like, oh yeah, I'm totally compartmentalizing. Right? But when it comes to these kind of subtle things of who's monitoring you when you're writing a post, you don't really have that. So it's just you, and it's God within the heart. And if we're not turning to God within the heart, well, we're not going to be getting any kind of, red flags, perhaps, that we're at least noticing. But this type of subtle compartmentalization, I think, takes, when it comes up, I don't think there's enough discussion around it, personally, on how to navigate it, that there's space to discuss these things, kind of like what you're creating here right now, that, oh wow, like I'm not the only one. That's reassuring. That's reassuring to know that I'm not the only one. And then it's also, I feel like it's this balance of not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. If this is also a platform we're using to serve, and genuinely there's a mood of service, then okay, it has a function. But how, as you mentioned before, how do we not get sucked into this? And then that becomes really, really hard. So we need people who can really are really good at holding the tension, right? Because what happens, and I'll borrow a phrase my husband speaks of very often. He's very wise, so I'm borrowing from him. He often speaks about tension means that there's opposing forces on both sides, but it doesn't mean that you're caving to one or the other. It means you're using both, right, to actually hold you upright. But also balance means that sometimes you need to err on one side and then err on the other side, and consistently do this dance. And that takes a lot of spiritual maturity, and it takes a lot of finesse. And it means being grounded within our teachings, like you were mentioning, Sharanagati, of any spirit of spiritual texts in general. And it also means having that practical lens of, okay, how do I navigate this in a world where that might not be the focus? So I stay true to my inner core values, and at the same time, I can show up in a way where I'm not playing the game, but I can actually add something of value and be satisfied. Whoever is open to hearing that, those are the people that I genuinely want to connect with, instead of the allurement of I can reach masses of people and they may not be ready.
I'm sorry, that allure is really irresistible. not that I'm reaching masses of people, but I often used to wonder about this even before social media was like really blowing up. I used to wonder about this like pre-social media days, before Instagram was really popular, or even Facebook for that matter. When I would look at other preachers, and I'm sure it was full of envy, so I'll just take responsibility for that right now. But I would look at other preachers, and I always a lot of times when I would hear preachers, especially the ones that were popular, because those are the ones you get envious of, the real popular ones, I always used to wonder, like, man, it looks like they're preaching to reach like the greatest common denominator. So those of us who have been around for a little bit longer, we want a little bit more juice, a little bit more detail, but we go to the classes that are meant for, that are addressing larger masses of people, like a Sunday feast, or even, frankly speaking, even a Bhagavatam class. And the message always seems to be a message that's digestible for the greatest common denominator. And it's kind of irresistible, because when you reach the greatest common denominator, you get reciprocation. There's reciprocity that encourages a feedback loop. So the same thing certainly happens with social media, with the likes and everything. You share a message that's accessible to the greatest common denominator, and you get reciprocity for that. And so it encourages that. And so I have two things for this. I'm interested in your realizations on this, or just maybe your contemplations on this. One question is, do we sell out when we do that? It's a genuine question I wonder about, like just selling out. Like I'm not going on like, hey guys, if you want to solve your problems, you got to chant Hari Nam. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. I'm not telling like that. I'm saying something that would be appreciable for devotees, so I hope and I think, but it's also accessible to the greatest common denominator. So is that a sellout? To some degree, I sometimes wonder if I'm selling out. That's one part of the question. And the other part, and this is the more critical part for me, I often would wonder, and again, this is probably my envy speaking, but I will often wonder if people's realizations got stunted because of always doing that. Like how many times can you say, be the best version of yourself, control your mind like this and that, and you're like, what's the word I'm looking like? Almost crippled. You're almost like crippling yourself from entering into deeper and more spacious realms of conscious expansion because of that sense of like selling out or always trying to reach the greatest common denominator. And so both these things I actually wonder about. On the one hand, is this selling out? And on the other hand, am I like, in a sense, sabotaging myself? Because if I do this like long term, then my own realizations aren't really deepening, because they don't have to deepen to reach the greatest common denominator. And this has been in my head for a really, really long time. And yeah, so I'm curious about, this is a tension in me. I don't know if you've encountered this tension and you have some thoughts on this. Kishore, also, I'm sure you have something with this too.
Yeah. Kishore, do you want to go first?
No, I want to hear you, Vrindavan. I'm always speaking on Chit Chat. I want to hear you.
Thank you. So first, I think and is it depends.
Oh, you cutting out. We missing it.
Yeah, we're missing the juice. We're missing the wisdom. I think
Okay,
you're back
start
now.
over.
Am I back?
Start over. Yeah, start over.
Back.
I said that it depends. It depends on what your intention is in the first place. And so this is really where I found the Enneagram to be so valuable. And so because it speaks to what is the ego lens by which you see the world through, right? So we're talking about our psychophysical nature. This is not in any relationship to the soul. This is just, how your ego is wired. And so for some, our ego is wired in such a way that we need depth. And that is what matters the most. And if you are wired in that way, this will feel like selling out to you 100%. And for others, we're not maybe so wired for depth. We appreciate it, we like it, but actually we're more about that kind of greater masses and keeping it a little bit more light, right? Because that's kind of the realm in which we play with, or that we play in. And so depending on how you're wired, I think it's so important from that place because that's tapping into that is being authentic. So if you are a depth seeker and you are trying to almost, forgive me for using this word, but pander to the masses, honestly, it's not going to be satisfying, and you will consistently feel like you're selling out. And if you work the other way, you may not feel like you're selling out. You may truly feel like, yes, I am in line with my nature, with my purpose, and so I can go about doing this in a way where it feels very, very much aligned.
That's very nice.
Yeah, that's very nice, and that resonates a lot for me, because I feel like the problem becomes when there becomes a concrete, style or way of like, this is how it has to be, this is how you reach the masses, and reaching the masses equals success. I think that's when it starts to get really, really like messed up in people's heads, because somebody might not be wired for that. They might be wired for more depth or alone time, or just like, internal creativity. However, they're now measured up to a standard that like it doesn't really make sense for everyone. But then there comes all these feelings of not feeling validated or not feeling seen because I'm not pandering, or etc. So I really appreciate that, because I barely know about the Enneagram. I just know of things that Rukmini has told me, and I know what my Enneagram type is and that kind of stuff. But I do love the idea that we're all very different, in this psychophysical makeup that we've inhabited, culturally, obviously, our upbringings, we're all so very different. And trying to be like smushed into kind of this, I'm just like thinking of standardized testing and how awful that is. I remember when I was in high school and they tried to get me to learn calculus and trigonometry. I was just like, this is not who I am. This is not who I am.
I almost didn't graduate high school because of trigonometry.
I just got lucky. That's all I can say. Because I can't do math to save my life.
I'm wondering what the possibility is for. I don't know, because I think like where I always get kind of stuck is like, okay, I can understand this, and internally I know what's right for me, right? It's like internally I know that I don't want to do that, I don't want to, and I'm using I as like in general, I don't want to do that. I don't want to pander, do things that make me feel like I'm selling out. However, like Jaya was saying, the allure of like wanting to do that is so, not only is it like, intoxicating, but it also feels like it's almost like this peer pressure kind of thing. Like, well, that's what everyone else is doing, so I guess that's what I have to do. It seems like that's what is the norm. What's the status quo, So how do we break out of that status quo?
Yeah, I feel like this is connected to the validation point brought up earlier.
Yes.
Seeking validation and the I exist sort of thing. And it is definitely seen, even in our own communities, that those who are able to reach the masses, they are kind of esteemed in the community. They get like a special seat in the kirtan. They get the garland when they walk into the room. They get the introduction, even though they ain't singing, they ain't gonna give no class, but they're gonna get an introduction because they're in a special position because of that ability or power. And so that becomes sort of the standard in the minds. It's like a cultural thing, basically. And the need for validation is so intrinsic as social beings. It's so important that naturally you'll be moving toward that direction because it's the culture. So I guess it leads to the question: how do I find validation from within? It looks like a lot of these. Our reasoning is going to bring us to this question: how do we find validation within? Yeah, so yeah, I guess that's will be my question here also to you. Like, how do you find that within, maybe on a personal level, and maybe a suggestion to others how they might seek or discover validation from within, so that puts less pressure on them, the sort of culture to get out and be validated from without.
Mm. The first thing that comes to mind for me, you know, and sure, while you were speaking, this is what was coming up for me. Why? Why are we seeking that? Why are we seeking that type of validation? And that the answer to that why, going deeper than I want to be liked or I want to be seen, there's something more. We're probably not receiving something in our own lives. And to actually figure out what that is. Because if we're looking to it in this place, then we're probably looking for it in other ways as well, not just on social media. How can we figure, and that takes deep questioning of really spending time and refusing to be satisfied with the surface level of, well, we just all need validation, right? The why is just so, so important. And when we're able to figure out the why of, you know, for some, it may be that I don't feel like I exist when I'm not being seen. Or for others, it may be that I feel more secure. I feel secure now that people are, you know, I need that. It's not actually validation in terms of I'm being liked, but rather it's validation in terms of, oh, I'm okay. I'm okay. Right? To be able to distinguish those is just actually so important. And we project our needs in so many different ways, in so many different forms. But to actually be able to go and own it and to say, I am missing this in my life. And that's why I'm searching for it here. I think that is so essential. And this is not just essential within the forum that this topic we're spending time in about social media, but this is so essential as spiritualists, that as Bhakti practitioners, to understand what is my need, because this is something, you've probably experienced this a lot, Kishore, probably yourself as well, that if you've come to this practice of bhakti and you haven't necessarily grown up with it, like I've been so lucky to in my own life, very often people who join or come to this path are looking to get something from this path. They're not coming to necessarily contribute their own material desires and their own
true.
Right, their own material desires and their own material needs. This now becomes this, and this is why we often hear say that, oh, your material conditionings come with you, you know, when you enter the spiritual path. But how often do we make the connection that now I had all these desires when I was not trying to follow a spiritual path, but now I'm actually just trying to dovetail it into the spiritual path. And that can cause so much friction and chaos and so much heartache, actually. But when people come and when we come and we know what our needs are and we know what the spiritual path is, it's not the place to fulfill those needs. Rather, it's helping us to realize that all needs can be fulfilled if we actually surrender and we recognize our true nature and our true purpose. Then our spiritual lives and those of others around us actually become very rich and meaningful, because the other person then isn't somebody that I'm looking to and being like, well, I don't understand why you're getting more recognition than me. I've been here for much longer. I can sing better, or I can do this better, and you're getting recognition. Oh, and then that can breed envy.
This leads me to wonder if kind of plugging into the digital universe obfuscates the ability to see what our needs are. Like, it seems like, you know how sometimes where you have to kind of just like fast a little bit and detach from a particular thing just to get perspective. You know,
Mm.
I always like this verse from the Gita where Krishna says that about the banyan tree, the upside down banyan tree, and he says no one knows where the roots began, where they're in, or what its foundation is. And one commentary I read about that is that it means that no one is able to see the tree for what it is because of attachment. And therefore, Krishna is recommending in that verse, you have to cut it down with the acts of detachment, because the idea is that detachment will give perspective. So I'm just loving this idea that there's something that I need, and I enter into the digital universe to seek those needs, but it's like eating Cheetos or Flaming Hots. You know, I don't think I know anyone that doesn't like Flaming Hots. That was a non-devotee. Like, you grow up, we all like Flaming Hots, you know, but it's cheap. It doesn't satisfy you. It doesn't nourish you in any way. But if you keep eating the Flaming Hots, it gives you the sense that you're eating something, that you're getting a little bit of nourishment, a little bit. But then when you like actually stop doing that, you can really figure out, oh, I need some vegetables. I need some water. Pepsi isn't going to cut it, you know? So yeah, I guess in the quest for discovering what the needs are, it seems like there needs to be like a healthy like period. I don't know what that means. It means probably different things for different individuals, but like moving back against that for a week, for two, and like discovering like, oh, this is what I really need. And then doing that, and then maybe re-entering the field after that's been clarified. I don't know. You have thoughts on that, or I'm sure you must encounter these sorts of things in your coaching all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I encounter it in my coaching. I encounter it in myself. I'm always astounded by how much I don't know that I need, and it's amazing because it's almost as though other people are better equipped to tell me what I need than I can figure out for myself, right? Because it's and I think we all get it can get difficult for us when you see somebody and it's very clear to you what they need, but it's not clear to them what they need, right? And so and I think that's so much what this self-discovery process is. And you know, this is one of the verses that I love in the Gita so much, when Krishna says, you know, do the work that is according to your own nature, right? And I think a lot of what happens, whether it's within a spiritual institution or whether outside, is that we see certain types of work or certain types of careers or certain ways of writing or certain posts, and we see that, wow, that's what gets attention. And so we're never actually able to go back and see, well, how am I, like, what is my nature? How am I built? And stay true to that. And so in some ways, what that means is that we're actually going against what Krishna is saying in the Gita, that even if you do your work imperfectly, better to do that imperfectly than to do another's perfectly, right? And I think a lot of social media, and it's funny, I'm just making this connection now, is actually that I'm doing I'm writing, I'm posting, I'm showing up in ways that is not actually according to my nature. But that piece about, but that's what gets the claps, that's what gets the validation, as you brought up earlier, that's what's fueling me.
The Flaming Hots.
The Flaming Hots.
The Flaming Hots. You know, hearing this, I'm sorry to be hijacking this a little bit, but I'm scared of what I need. To be like 100%, to be 100, you know, as we would say growing up, to be 100. I think to some degree, I'm scared of what I need. And I don't know if this is just like a thing that happens with being in a monastery for a long time and then coming out and cultivating like gyan. And I say gyan, and not as a pejorative, but as a very positive thing. Sambandha gyan, and just studying all the time. And I still study all the time. That's my thing. I love to study. I love to, as far as my ability allows me, to recapitulate what I learned and with friends and so on. But there is a part of that, you know, the sort of self-abnegation when you live in an ashram. and that too for like over a decade. You're kind of self-abnegating, and that's considered glorious, and it is glorious. Honestly, I feel it is glorious to some degree until you have to like actually come out of that and engage with things, the world. And I guess for me, the last 5 years, because I've been out of ashram for about 5 years now, I think a part of me is like scared of what I need. And so I'm like, I just like put it over here and like, okay, let me lock that up right there. Take the key, throw it away. And yeah, and I guess probably because of that, I have very unhealthy patterns with social media. My question would be, my question is, I'm sure you've dealt with this with yourself and maybe with your clients, certainly, how to get over the fear of discovering what you need, especially especially with this like Vedanta guillotine over your head, in a sense. Vedanta is like very renounced spirit, and renouncing all sense gratification, everything for the pleasure of Krishna, et cetera, et cetera. And that thing is always over my head, guillotine is not a positive image. I still take it largely as positive. I feel happy with my knowledge. But there is a part of you that's just like, it's like a guillotine. It's like this pressure that if I indulge or if I even discover what I need and I kind of embrace that, I'm turning my back on Krishna, or I'm not really moving progressively on the path. And I don't care what anyone tries to tell me. That's another problem with me, like, because you're probably like more, like for me, I'm probably more well-read than half the people who would talk to me. And so even they try to solace me, I'm just like, yeah, and I appreciate my friends' kindness to me. But then a part of me is just like, no, I'm not going to turn my back on Krishna, and then I stay in this position. I'm not really engaging maybe with what I needed. I kind of, I guess, become a loser. How to get over fear? What do you recommend? This is too vulnerable. We're going to erase this episode after this. We're erasing this episode. People are like, wait a minute, Jai, that's got a heart. Hey, everyone come in here. Look at this.
I so deeply appreciate you, Jai Jagannath. I'm really, when you were speaking, a few things came to mind. One was something that you brought up yourself. I think because you have such, and forgive me, I'm gonna speak about you personally, because I feel like with any of these questions, there is no broad answer, right? Even when I work with my clients, the way I work with one person is very different than the way I work with somebody else, because you have a very particular nature and you have a very particular environment that you've been raised in, that you've been trained in. And because of that, all of those things have a role to play in the way in which you could potentially start to address this, or if you wanted to work on this. And I think one of the things, especially for you, is that you are so well-read that just you need scripture in order to actually like help motivate you. Anybody who just tries, who would ever, even from the kindness of their hearts, to just give you any kind of self-help, whatever kind of feel, would just be like, yeah, thank you. I don't think so. Like, this is, my heart has been given here, like, you can't take that away. So I think that's one thing. So the fact that you may experience that does not surprise me at all, first of all, and that's okay. But what came to mind when you were speaking, and I think, please, in so many ways, you're my senior in terms of spiritual advancement and such, and so I'm just sharing something you already know, and that is, when you were speaking, the pastime of Kardama Muni came to mind, and how he spent time to figure out what he needed, and what he needed was he desired a wife. I'm not saying that's what you desire. I'm just saying that's what Kardama Muni desired, right? But the point is, he figured out what his need was, right? That was it. And he went to Krishna with it. And as you know, in the Bhagavatam, when Vishnu comes, he has tears in his eyes. And that visual is just so powerful for me, that if we can go with our needs to Krishna, that he may have tears in his eyes. Like, is that the kind of, is that God really? That he's just so touched by our own admission of our needs? And it may not even seem like it may be, quote, spiritual, but he's touched. He's so touched. And he just, he bestows so much blessings upon him. And to me, that section in the Bhagavatam indicates to me that there is a huge place for our needs. And that it's a part of taking responsibility. And it's a part of spiritual maturity, not just emotional, material maturity. It's a part of spiritual maturity to know what our needs are, to be honest with them, and to and it isn't any kind of deviation in any way, to spend time to actually figure out what they are.
Okay, Kishore, my session is over. Now your turn. I'm getting red like a polar bear.
And please forgive me. I mean,
no, I'm very appreciative. It's just yeah, it's uncomfortable because you're just like Thank you for those insights. Absolutely, though.
Something that I'll just share, because when Jaya was sharing about his time in the ashram and then coming out of the ashram, etc., and for me, it was very interesting because I was in the ashram, but it was like, the Bhakti Center, which is, it's an ashram, and there's a temple, but there's a contemporary feel to it. And my experience was always my experience, both like with my godbrothers and my superiors kind of telling me to do this, was just like kind of keep one foot in my career and material doings and have the other foot in my seva at the Bhakti Center. And so I always felt like that, and I always felt like there was this schism in myself, because that self-abnegation that Jaya was speaking about is so strong at times. It's just like, why do I desire so much, or feeling weird about your needs, or feeling like off about them, And I think I'll say something that really came up for me. And I Jaya already said this, but I feel like it's so much easier to just lock up your needs in the cupboard and just like throw away the key, and then maybe not even realize that you're now seeking the validation because you self-abnegated on those needs through, I feel like social media is obviously it has its like malignant kind of things, but compared to other things in life where people kind of look for that solace, it's kind of benign in a sense, And so it's interesting because we're talking about social media, but it's really like there's so many things that people are trying to kind of look for love, look for their needs, look for that validation. And it can get really, I feel like it can get really scary. Like it can get really scary when you're really just not being honest with yourself, not being honest with Krishna. And I feel, something that you said, Vrindavan, a while ago that really, it struck a chord for me, and I wanted to mention it, was just like, who is supervising us? I mean, there's no one supervising us when we are on social media or on our phones and this kind of thing. And this purport by Srila Prabhupada it's always in my mind, actually, and I've been really like taking it to heart recently, of just he speaks about, this is in the 9th chapter of the Gita, I think it's verse 27 or 8 or something like this. And Srila Prabhupada is speaking about Yukta Vairagya. So Yukta Vairagya is this principle of just, if I use it in Krishna's service, right, then it is great. Then I can engage with the material paraphernalia if I'm using it in Krishna's service. And Srila Prabhupada very directly says that the definition of a Yukta is somebody that is practicing Krishna consciousness under supervision of a superior. And that is something that I feel like I've been really trying to like hear that in my own mind, because I feel like just in this reality that we're living in, like COVID, like we're just all dispersed across, all over the place. We're in our homes. When you're in front of your computer or your phone, it's like, what is the what is the superior directive or person who's guiding me there? And I feel like it becomes such a difficult, and I think this is a question that I'm asking both of you, is like when I don't have perhaps that direct, like a guru or, a shiksha guru, someone, a teacher, a mentor, like someone who's not there for me, if I don't have access to that and I'm left to my own devices, because of course, someone will say, well, you should listen to lectures and you should be a part of a sangha and you should this and this, that's kind of the classic thing that we'll say. But it's like, how can we really find that internal strength to turn towards the superior, to the teachings from my superior, whoever that person may be, mentor, life coach? Like, how do I find the resolve to do that when it's so much easier, it's so much more alluring? I'm going to get validation. I'm going to feel good because now my needs have been met in some like weird way by just doing whatever I want, and playing into the game of, for this example, social media, but there's so many other different examples. Like, how do I do that? Feels very difficult.
Jai Jagannath?
Yeah, because he gave us a dissertation. I kind of missed the question a little bit.
the question was, how do I stay guided by superior direction?
Oh yeah.
Even when that like perhaps physically isn't there, whether that be physically in the form of a body, or like even when I'm like not listening to it, like let's say I listen to the lecture and it's great, I got the teachings. It's like how do I what's the internal resolve that I need to take to face myself in the direction of that teacher, of that mentor, of that light?
I feel like in our devotional communities, this is an ongoing question because we're not under the supervision of our superiors. Of course, we may live in devotional communities, and I think there's something to having like people's eyes on you, and I think this is the advantage of, like, for example, living with a partner, a wife, or spouse. There's someone's eyes on you, and because of that, there's a sort of there's some pressure to show up in a certain way. You have responsibilities to tend to. Same with living like in the ashram. We're not under our guru per se, but we're with God brothers or other ashramites, and their eyes are falling on you regularly. There's hardly any privacy, and so because of that supervision, maybe not of your guru, but these eyes, there's a sort of pressure to show up. Or similarly, even if you live by yourself, but you're part of a community and you don't show up to community events, then people are like, what's going on? How come you didn't show up to this event or that event? So it's like kind of, you're protected. There's some supervision there. With the present situation, with lockdowns and so on, we don't have anyone's eyes on us, or hardly anyone. A lot of people have been left in isolation. Then it becomes particularly a conundrum how to figure this out. That's been my own personal lived experience. I mean, I know that was one of the advantages of living in an ashram in open space. Someone's eyes are on you. Now, a lot of our ashrams are largely empty, and if anyone lives there, they have like their own room, and I promise you, ain't nothing good going on. Because there's no one's eyes on you. So that's what I would say. That it becomes, supervision can mean the guru, but supervision can mean you're part of a community and you're participating in community events, or you have a spouse and someone's eyes are on you, and the persons whose eyes are on you, they're having standards that you also share, and so they can like call you out, or just check in on you, like, hey, I noticed that you came to the programs, you didn't have a bee bag, you didn't chant, are you okay? Like, what's going on? So in lieu of the guru, you have that part. And if that part goes missing, then the devil, all right, homie by himself now. I don't know.
Really appreciate that. I really, really appreciate that. Yeah, I think that having people around you is just so, so important. I know for myself, sometimes I'll write something and I'll quickly run it by Roxanath, and he'll be like, really? I'm like, what? He's like, that sounds, and he'll say something, I'll be like, salesy, market, it sounds like I'm marketing. what? No. It's just helpful, right? It's just helpful to have that. But I think along with that, to just add to Jai Jagannath's point, which was so meaningful, is that I think there also needs to be enough trust and faith that we have in that individual that we can go up to them, because they're not going to be the ones who are going to constantly be like coming up to us and saying, what are you posting? True. What are you writing? What are you doing? You know, like, and we wouldn't want that. But that we feel so comfortable that we could actually go, and maybe it's not every post, it's not every time, but when we are having that internal battle, when we are having that internal struggle, and you're kind of like looking at what you wrote and you're like, I don't know, and to just run it by somebody and to say, what do you think? And to really be able to take in their feedback and trust that it's coming from a place of your best interest, and as Jai Jagannath mentioned, of the fact that you espouse or are aspiring towards the same values and principles.
Nice. Well, I don't know. I feel like our conversation, we started in one place, and then Jai Jagannath got read like a book because he decided to get vulnerable, which is a mistake he'll not make again in the public arena. Lesson learned. And then, it's kind of, it went from a place of like, man, social media is pigeonholing us into being like these fake people, to the discovery like, oh, I have some needs that's causing me to seek external validation. I need to discover what those needs are, and then I can get validation from within, and that would offset the need for external engagement in unhealthy ways. And to talking some strategies that we might go through to do so. That's a lot. I don't know if you have any final statements, Bryn. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom and reading me like a book. And I actually really did appreciate that. I think it must be something about your energy that inspired me to just open up a little bit and be like, yeah, I'm scared about what I need, and I don't even want to look at that. It must be something about your energy, because I'm normally very closed off. Yeah, there's this meme that I shared on my social media some time ago, and the top of the meme said, "This is me opening up to someone," and it was a piece of orange being peeled off, and when that layer got peeled off, it was another orange peel underneath that. and then I just shared it and was like, "Sorry, y'all, that's just how I am."
Well, I think because of you, Jai Jagannath, the conversation went deeper. So thank you. I think so, because or else how could we ever go from, and I think that as important as the conversation is about being pigeonholed in pride and social media as an example of how that can happen to us, the whole trajectory, and you summed it up so beautifully, towards figuring out our own needs. It wouldn't be alive if you hadn't shared, from your own life. And I think that in itself is probably helpful to so many, just because how often do we sit around and talk about our needs? This is not something that, or the fact that, wow, I'm afraid to even figure out what my needs are. This is just not what's spoken of. And to me, that's an indicator of it's exactly what we need.
Thank you so much. I know what I've been trying to do these little videos on my social media, because I had stopped posting on social media for about 2 or 3 months. I was just like, nah. I was going through like a creative inway, I think because I was feeling jaded, but I was trying to break that. So I started doing little videos of the sort of stuff I like to do. And I think I have my topic for my next video from this conversation, which is giving me a lot of insight.
Yes, and I just wanted to say thank you to Vrindavan and also to Jai Jagannath, because I agree with her wholeheartedly that the conversation took a turn because you were able to be so open and because you were able to like share that fear. And I think like Vrin said, it's like we don't sit around talking about what we need, and we also don't really sit around talking about like what we're afraid of, or like like, and like real fears, like not like I'm afraid of a spider, like I'm afraid of like I'm afraid of not being validated. I'm afraid that, you know.
Right.
although there are some people who are genuinely afraid of spiders, but I think it's such an important space to just be able to like actually talk about that, you know, have sangha, have community where you talk about those things. You know, something that I've noticed in friends, people that are in my life, and I won't go into it too much, is that I realized like a lot of the conversation was like my successes, you know, like what I'm doing that's working, like how you know, what's generating the buzz, like this kind of stuff. And I really started to feel like, well, what about, you know, the not so catchy stuff? What about the fears? What about the disappointments? What about the needs? What about this kind of stuff? And I feel like the more we have these kinds of conversations, whether it be like here in a chit chat setting or personally, they'll become more normalized in a sense. You know, it won't be that only sharing my successes is what's going to generate, I don't know, buzz or likes or validation. Because I feel like, I'll end with this, I feel like shouldn't I be able to feel validated just by sharing what I need, or just by sharing like what I'm afraid of? Like, shouldn't I feel validated by sharing that? And I mean, I think the answer is yes, but unfortunately we live in a world where it's like maybe not so much, you know? So thank you so much, Bryn, for helping us create this space with your energy, because your energy is so sweet and soft and encouraging, inviting. That's a good word. Yeah.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I'll just say one thing. Something came to mind when you just shared now, and I thought the reason I think why the successes are what comes out first, you know, when you know, whenever you meet somebody, is because there isn't the space to actually go deeper. Right? How often do we have like an hour to just sit and talk? It takes time to actually go into these spaces. And because those environments aren't necessarily created, then, I mean, the last thing that I would ever want is somebody to say to me, "How are you doing?" And I say, "Actually, you know, there's a lot going on." And they're like, "Oh yeah, that's good to hear," and walk away because they weren't paying attention anyway. Right? And I promise, maybe you don't want to try this out, but if you do, you'll have an experience like that. That's what tends to happen. And so that's why there's this constant like, oh, I'm doing this or I'm doing this. It's like, it's like social media. It grabs your attention. But when you actually have space to go deeper, and it takes time, then you, just by the mere act of listening, that's what I experience every time, even within a coaching session. My job is just to hold space. I don't need to say much. There's just so much, you know, when you said internal validation, just to be heard is validating. You know, when I think of, and I'm sure most of your listeners probably know of Radhanath Swami, that's one of the things I think of. He's so incredible at doing. He can just hold space and be so present. And that's the greatest gift we can give somebody. It's not advice. It's holding space.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Brent. This has been more fun than I anticipated. I thought we would have a nice time and get some enlightenment, but it's been a lot of food for thought. Like in a more grave sense, in a sober sense, I've gotten some food for thought. So thank you so much for joining us. You're our first guest, so it was very lovely to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so honored. I didn't realize I was your first guest. I just thank you both so much for inviting me, and I just had such a wonderful time with both of you.
Nice.
Thank you so much, Bryn. Thank you everyone for watching, and hopefully we'll have you back on the show again, Bryn, sometime in the future, and we'll be here next week on Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you all so much. Hari Hari Bol.